All right, again, two more things to do before we finish today. One is to go over Chapter 6, which begins in your book on page 173. And the other one is to go over the homework assignment because you should all have a copy right now. All right, I'm going to do those as two different lectures. So as I did before, I'm going to go for about 15 minutes or so, get through the stuff of this chapter, then quick save this and produce it. That's a new record for me because by the time the break was over, the first two this morning have already been produced and are out there on YouTube. So Jeff's proud of Jeff. All right. So Chapter 6, Lesson 6, Understanding and Using JavaScript Objects. All right. We've done very little using JavaScript as an object-oriented programming language. And one thing that I had told you from day one in the 119 class is JavaScript is what's known as an object-based programming language, meaning you have full object-oriented capabilities which you can or may not use depending on what you want to do with them. All right, so we'll talk about that, string manipulation, sorting arrays, searching arrays rather, and creating your own custom objects. I did mention this, you've seen this site before. Unfortunately, it's down right now. But that hunlock.com site, I don't know if you remember that. It's a very ugly site, but they've got special pages off of there that go over JSON, JavaScript object notation. There's an array page. There's a number page. There's like about 5 or 6 pages. All right, so if you're having trouble with, with anything in JavaScript, I'd suggest starting there. Like I said, not right now because it's down, crashed, undergoing maintenance, or some other annoyance. Well, and it's been like that for the last hour plus. So as it says, the following sections define object syntax and talk you through the most common built-in objects. They also show you how to build your own object. Good, bad, or indifferent. When you are creating objects in JavaScript, there's at least 2 or 3 different ways, and maybe more than that, to do it. All right, so well, that's fine, Jeff. Which one do I use? Whichever one seems to make the most sense to you would be the one that I would use. In this website that I told you that I've been building now, there will be a thing that's in there on object-oriented JavaScript. All right, I found this online. I mean, is it great? No, but it's pretty good. It starts with a primer on object-oriented terminology you need to know. Then it talks about how to create an object, and then it talks about how to do prototyping. All right, I thought it was one of the better ones when I took a look through it, and just took a look through it and was looking for one. All right, so it says if you want to create a brand new number object, you can do this. You probably aren't going to create an object like that because there's not really right now, there's not a whole lot you can do with it. And if you said, well, right now, what's the difference between var x equal new number 5 and var x equal 5? Well, that one's an object. What kind of object is that? Technically, it's a string. So you can do different string operations on it. Normally, when you create objects, there's different ways of doing it. We're going to look at some of them down here. But normally, after you've created an object, to be able to access either a method of the object or some of the data of the object, it's the name of the object dot, and either the data or the name of the object dot and the name of the method. All right. So they show you an example here. This may or may not make a whole lot of sense. All right. It says the following is an example of adding a method and a property to a main document object. What does that mean? Well, document already exists. So not only can you create your own objects, and after they're created, you can add properties and you can add methods to them. You can add properties and you can add methods to built-in JavaScript objects. You can do that. All right, such as the document object. All right. Now, when you look at this, this may or may not make a lot of sense, but right here, this document.me, right there, they are literally setting up a new variable that's called Brad Daly. I think everybody can look at that and understand that. What this says is that when I do a document.writeMe, what I want you to do is call this function. What's the key thing about that? What's missing from that? There are no parentheses. Because it's saying that's the function to call. It's not telling you to call the function. If you put the parens there, then you'd have the equivalent of this. That would call the function. All right? So this is going to write out Brad Daly from the example that they put in there. Now, is this a good example or a bad example? It's an example. But it's something you could, if you wanted to, start with, manipulate, play with, do a lot of different things with. One of the things, again, when I was showing you this site, one place that I'm end up going to a lot, and I'm going to show it to you for, let's see, it's here, is the Mozilla Developer Network. They just have got so much out there on everything. You know, it's developer.mozilla.org. All right, and they've got CSS, they've got HTML, HTML5, etc. They just got a boatload of stuff. I don't know if it'll let me do this. There you go. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, graphics. You almost name it, and it's out there. All right.
Why does it not matter where you put the document.me? Is after the function?
Here?
Yeah.
I think you could transpose these two lines. I don't think that would matter. But you've got to give the .me a value before you call the function that's going to use the value. Does that make sense? But I don't know any reason why you couldn't flip these two lines. These two right here. That shouldn't matter. All right. JavaScript has a number of built-in objects, and they show some of them here. So once you do this, and you create these are what you can call on a number object. Not a whole lot, but there's a few things. All right. More than that are string objects, because as you know, and that's why I really and truly wish that unlock was up, so you can go back and take a look at it, but there are literally scores of different string methods, built-in string methods that you can call. Some of them are shown here, but this is not an exhaustive list. You've used these. Bless you. I had you do things like, ask the user if they want to do it again. Type in yes or no. But, type in Y or N. But most of the time, if it's Y or N, somebody's going to type in the word yes or the word no. So we use the charat to just grab the first character. And if we don't want to have to check for upper or lower case, we also might call the two upper or the two lower case on it. Bless you. All right. All right. One of the key things to remember is when you use the different string operations, what does -1 mean? If that returns -1, what does that mean? 2 words. 2 words. The first word you had right, not found. So if I'm using a subscript function, so if I'm going through the Gettysburg Address, and I want to know how many times the word Washington is used in there, and let's say it's not, then it's going to return -1. All right, that's the absence of something. Then they show you examples. You can combine strings using the plus sign, meaning that the plus sign is an overloaded operator. You can search using index of. You can search from the beginning. You can search from the end. You can split a string into an array. All right. So splitting a string into an array is like remember the PHP, we had the implode and the explode? All right. Here we've got split and we've got join. Work virtually the same way. Remember that when you create an array, you can create an empty array in this language. Again, not all languages let you do that. You can create an array and you can give it initial values. And when you do that, brackets, not curly braces. All right. And you can just add elements to an array at any time. You can add them like this, and you can also push. Adding them like this, the disadvantage of doing it this way is you need to have some kind of a numerical index. Doing it this way, it just is going to keep adding to whatever's on the end. One thing to realize right here, and it may not sound like a big thing, but it is. We talked about parentheses before. There's no parens on the end of that. Why? Because it's not or a method. It's a property. All right? And it can get confusing because when you're using string length, then you need the parens. And when you're using an array length, you don't use the parens because one's a method and one's a property. All right. Some of the things that you can do with arrays, we've talked about those back in the 119 class. All right, so they show you how to combine arrays, how to iterate through an array, and again, that's that for in loop. And if you use the for in loop, it's some books call it a fast for. It's a little bit less typing, but that assumes that whatever you're doing inside of here in the loop, you are not changing the array in any way. If you are changing the array, typically you'll get an error if you try to use the for in loop. So again, converting an array into a string, the opposite of explode, or the opposite rather of whatever it was. We've got join now, all right? Which is like explode that we had in PHP. Whoops. And again, they give some examples here of pushing and popping, etc., moving stuff onto an array. They work with days of the week. It's always nice when you do this to work with something that at least makes sense to most people. All right. Dates, again, JavaScript provides total date support, meaning that it provides support for both month, day, year, and minute, or second, minute, hour. Math, here's some of the math operations that you can play with. Really, when you work with these, all right, even though it doesn't show it right here, the recommendation is with most programming languages, when you call their built-in math functions, that what you should be actually passing to it are real numbers. In other words, floats and doubles. Okay? So I would have probably put a 0.0 on the end of these things. All right, regular expressions, remember these? I means ignore case. G means global because if you leave G off, it only finds the first one. M, as it says, do a multi-line search, so don't stop when you see a line feed character. What's the character in regular expressions for the beginning of a line? It's the caret. What's the end of the line? It's the $sign. And if you remember, because I pointed you into this direction many a time, if you go to regular-expression.info or regular-expressions.info, that basically has everything in there you'd ever need to know about regular expressions. They've got tutorials. They even break it down by different languages. All right, so if you look in here, there's Java, there's JavaScript. They'll show you plenty of examples, so if you want to be able to do something, you'll be able to do it. All right, next they go into creating your own custom-defined objects. Well, this is where some of the power comes in. So I can catch back up here. This is the bottom of page 189. All right, and as it says, so far you've used the built-in JavaScript objects. They have several advantages in that they've already got a bunch of stuff that's been written for you. All right? Yes?
Do you have to define the properties of the object, or do you just make it because it's first name?
Yes and no. And what I mean is this. What you can do is you can just define an object. Then you can use something that's called prototyping to basically on the fly add whatever you want whenever you want to. Or when you create the object, you can add the stuff right in there. What some people do is they create the object and all they put in there is the data. And then outside, they go in and then they add the methods. All right, I was always taught for a pure object-oriented language, put all the data and all the methods right in the object itself. And then the prototype's available if you decide later you want to go back and add something later on. All right, so they give an example. I guess this is kind of what you asked here. You can do this. var user equal new object. Boom, user's an object. Then they're right away, what are they doing there? They're just adding properties to it. And as it says, you can also do it like this. A lot of people like doing it this way as opposed to this way because you can really see the key value types of pairs that you're using. All right. Plus, it looks more like JSON. And if you don't know what JSON is, you really should do yourself a favor when you get the time and go out to json.org. All right. It's not a real huge site. Again, not a very pretty site, but they show you how to use it in virtually every language. All right. There's Java. There's JavaScript. There's JavaScript JSON. All right. You go out there and boom. You probably don't want this because if you open it up, that's like a 500-page document from the ECMA. Anybody know what ECMA stands for? European Computer Manufacturer Association. That they, believe it or not, that's the actual governing body of JavaScript. It's not the W3C. All right, you can do it like this. Notice the usage of the word this. You would need it just like you did in Java. All right, so here we're setting the thing up, for lack of better words, and here we're actually instantiating. As it says, there's a couple ways you can do this. The first is to define a static function and then assign it as a property of the object. That's what they're doing here. So they're creating all the stuff, and then outside of that, they're creating a function. All right, is there an advantage or a disadvantage to doing that? I don't know. All right. I kind of like this, where everything is put together, bless you, in one big group. To me, that makes the most sense. It may not to you. The bottom line is, does it work? Not how did you do it? All right. Next, they do come in here and they talk about this prototyping object pattern. If you're going to read a part of this chapter, I would strongly suggest starting on 189 and going all the way to 195. It's about 6 or 7 pages, but they do a fairly good job in there of explaining at kind of a high level what objects are about. All right, so they talk next, this is the bottom of page 191, about using a prototyping object pattern. And as it says, it's an even more advanced way of creating objects than all the ways we've talked about previously. It says it's implemented by defining functions inside of the prototype attribute of the object instead of in the object itself. The big thing is, it's like I told you, you can add stuff on the fly. All right, that's kind of the reason I think that it was set up. So the reason prototyping is better than the functions defined in the prototype is they're created only once when JavaScript is loaded, not every time the new object is created. So again, it should conceivably be faster.
If you're making a lot of objects, yes.
Yes. And if you're making a lot of objects and the objects are big.
True.
All right. So they show an example here. It shows the code necessary to implement the prototyping pattern. Notice you define the object user P, all right, and then you set the prototype. There's nothing magical about that name, all right, other than it's the same name that's used up here. But you could have called it anything. So what have we done in here? In here, we've just defined the data, and then outside of it, we've defined the method. This is a pretty good exercise in here. All right, try it yourself. That starts on the bottom of page 192, and it's on 192, 193, and 194. All right, again, you might look at it and say, well, it's not bad, but it's kind of stupid, the stuff they put in there. No, but just go through it and look at the syntax. That's what's really important. And that's it for another chapter. So we have now completed section 1 of the book, which is the first 6 chapters. All right? And you've all got a copy now of the homework, so I'm going to go over it, but let me stop this and start again.